Welcome to the Farming on Purpose podcast, a podcast for farmers and ranchers ready to shift for a stronger future. Today's challenges in agriculture are new, but the grit and determination required to be successful are not. On the Farming on Purpose podcast, you'll hear how producers of all sizes and practices are moving mountains for things they believe in, all in the name of an industry that keeps growing and innovating for a stronger food system and stronger farm families. I'm your host, Lexi Wright, and I'm excited to discuss where producers are finding success, challenging the status quo, striving for better, and keeping our heritage alive, all while producing the food we depend on. Hey there, it's Lexi, and I am sliding into this podcast episode with an opportunity for those who are interested in it. The last time that you sat down to plan your marketing, do you know when it was? Was it hard? Were you confused? Did you feel like you actually should be working on your business instead of trying to make social media posts or write emails or design ads? If that's you, I created a system to develop a full year's marketing strategy and a plan to implement it in 8 hours or less. Yes, really, 8 hours, one day. Sit down, plan all of your marketing for the entire year, and actually have the things in place so you can implement it, not just a really pretty outline on a calendar. So you'll walk away with a roadmap for your marketing activities for the next 12 months, confidence in knowing exactly what to do and when to do it, and more time to focus on actually running your business instead of worrying about your marketing. So if you are tired of just winging it or getting stressed out by trying to remember to do your marketing, check out this offer. You can find out when it's ready at farmingonpurpose.com/plan. farmingonpurpose.com/plan. I'd love to see you there. Welcome back to Farming on Purpose. Today I have Janelle Anderson with me, and I'm really excited to have Janelle on to talk about her breadth of experience with farmsteading and homesteading, cattle, dairy cattle. There's really, I don't know if there's anything that we're going to talk about on the podcast that you guys haven't done. So pretty cool to have you here. Janelle is originally from Wisconsin and then grew her expertise in Western North Dakota, but they now, as I just found out, moved to Southern Middle Tennessee. We were chatting about the snow and I was like, this is not matching up. So thank you so much, Janelle, for being here today. Do you want to share with us a little bit of your ag background and how you got started, and then what's brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Wisconsin. I guess what you would call it is, maybe nowadays they would have called it homesteading, but we just lived country. We raised animals for fun, but also for our food source. And then after my 1-year college stint, I moved to Western North Dakota, where I eventually met my husband, who grew up in a ranching family, had been in his family for over 100 years. And him and I took over not only the ranch running it, but we also took over his family's run egg business. So we did like haying equipment, we serviced, sold parts, and as well as some cattle equipment. And then in 2022, we moved to Southern Middle Tennessee to raw land and started from scratch.
Very cool. So you had kind of grown up in this lifestyle, had experience there. Was it something that you always thought that you would pursue as an adult?
I don't think so. I think when I was growing up, I knew that I would never stay in Wisconsin, but I didn't understand where I would land. I think I always wanted to live rural, like in the country. I'm not so fond of having neighbors like right next to me, so I could always see that possible. But the animal aspect, I didn't see that coming round and back to my family in the future. So it's crazy that it has.
Yeah. Was it going to your husband's farm and business there that kind of brought that back into your life, or what was it that instigated that?
It was marrying back into it and realizing that this was something that I truly enjoyed and truly loved, and it expanded me. We went from raising cattle for us to eat. We never raised them ourselves. We never had a cow that had a calf, to having a cow-calf operation in Western North Dakota. And so it grew my experience and my knowledge base. So it was really cool to have full circle moments coming.
Yeah. What were some of the experiences there like that in those early years of taking over that business? And for you and your husband, was that something he always planned to go back to?
I think so. And we moved out to the ranch once we had gotten married, and I think that was his plan and his hope. He really enjoys animals and livestock and nutrition and all of that kind of stuff. It's what he went to school for, to college for. Um, it was an experience though, because we had to fill a whole ranch with cattle. And so here we were, newly married, had young children, and we're trying to build a herd from scratch. And we collected every kind of broken mouth cow that you could, and some wild ones and all of that kind of stuff. But it was a good experience for us because we got to build it like from scratch in a way, and that it was all on our backs to make it succeed or not. And we just did it in a way that worked for us and worked for our budget. And then going into the agriculture business, I couldn't tell you that I understood much about haying, even though we did it when I was growing up. Lots of little square bales and big round bales are the thing in North Dakota. So that was a switch for me, but just understanding all that goes into it. So there was a big learning curve, but a good learning experience.
Yeah. When you guys were in the midst of that, I mean, that's a lot to take on, as you said. What were some of the things that you focused on to help you grow and keep the business going?
Main thing was I was support for my husband. If he was the one with most of the knowledge when it came to raising cattle and choosing them, but I really studied and I love to learn. And so I would ask him questions. I asked his parents questions all the time. I was always observing so that I could become more familiar with it myself and see where I could help him. One of the biggest helps probably was that we grew up riding horses, and that's how we moved cattle and all of the things in North Dakota. And so it was a natural fit and a natural progression that way. Um, but just being willing to be a helpmate to my husband and open to just being what he needed it to be.
Mm. I think that partnership aspect in this business especially is so, so important. It's not something that is easy to do alone. So when you have that, I think it helps you both go a lot farther more quickly and more easily.
I agree. Yeah. Some of the things I did push back though was not spending money on a decent equipment, or like we had one tractor for a really long time that went between helping at the shop where needed with that stuff, but then also doing our other things. It was a lot of extra work. And so eventually he came around to investing in some older equipment to make it a little easier.
Yeah, the investment in equipment is a hard one. We are battling that on our farm as we try to figure out what exactly we need and what's worth it versus what we can make do with. But so that's kind of the ranch side of the story. When did you start adding some of the other things that you guys do that are more maybe homestead-y or things that you're growing for food for
Yeah,
yourself?
back in North Dakota, it's always shocking to people who are in kind of the homesteading lifestyle for us to say that we never raised a beef specifically for ourselves. We would support the local 4-H sales, and mostly everything that we grew, we sold through the sales ring or whatever it would be. So that's one thing that they were shocked at, and that's something we're doing now, is raising our own beef for our own consumption. But in North Dakota, we also had layer chickens, and that was kind of a hard thing for my husband to accept, that I wanted chickens, because he didn't want them. The one thing he told me that he would never allow me to have there was pigs. They had some pigs when he was growing up, and he said never. It was quite interesting. And a few years before we left North Dakota, we also added in a family milk cow, a Jersey, that I was able to purchase from one of my friends, which was a really good addition. And I think that gave my husband like a little like understanding of what is possible just beyond beef cattle, because it wasn't a huge thing in our area for people to start having family milk cows, though it used to be, but there was that gap of it not being normal.
Yeah. I find this place between farming and homesteading kind of like an awkward one, because I was similar when I were on our farm that we had started, and growing up, like we didn't raise cattle for us to eat ourselves. It was too expensive. We couldn't afford to eat our own cattle. It was better for to sell them. And so shifting from that and realizing like we lived on a farm, but we didn't really produce any of our own food, and kind of getting more into the homestead things of realizing we can do that too has been really, really exciting for me. We have a family milk cow also who I love so much. So I love hearing when other people have them. It's such a cool thing to have in your family, I think.
It is, and it's so helpful. I have found that even back in North Dakota, we had too much milk.
Yeah.
And so what it did is it fed our community. We got her in a time where things were a little unstable, I will just say. And so it was nice to be able to bring that in not only for ourselves so that we can continue to have butter and cheese and milk itself, but we also fed our community with it. And so that really opened my husband's eyes, like I said, that there's other things that we can produce off of our ranch at that time, but eventually where we're at with our farm in Tennessee, that is a little bit out of the norm of what he grew up with.
Yeah. So what was it like when you guys decided to transition to Tennessee? What kind of inspired the move? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so there were some family things that had come up, and not to go into that, we just decided that God was very clearly closing the door in North Dakota and that he was asking us to start over. And so that whole transition was probably one of the hardest things when you pick up and move your life. My husband had always lived in Western North Dakota. I mean, that ranch had been in his family for over 100 years. That's a really hard thing to come to terms with, but also to move across the country. And to be quite honest, we left all of our income on the table to start from scratch in a state that we had never lived in before. But it's been worth it. And it was definitely a good move for us. It was very hard. I would say that my cortisol levels were elevated to the point of probably horribleness for a very long time.
I bet. That is a huge life change. And the type of things that you were doing, you couldn't move just anywhere. You had to have something specific. What was that like as you guys searched for the property and kind of made plans to do the move?
Yeah, so one of our first things is that we were hoping to have a longer growing season. We never grew a garden back in North Dakota. The property that we were on, the ground wasn't great for growing vegetables or anything like that. We could have done it, but it would have taken a lot of amendments to make it work, and our water wasn't very good either. So that would have been really hard. But we knew that we wanted to grow more of our own food as far as a garden goes. And so we wanted to go in a place that maybe would the ability to grow longer, but also in the pastures to graze longer, to utilize these longer growing seasons. And so we figured it was probably going to be in the South, not so much in the Midwest, but we didn't know exactly where. And then I'm not going to lie, I was really looking forward to not being in negative 40 degrees with wind chill in the winter for so it felt like 8 months of the year.
That's a perk. Well, cool. And the property that you guys found eventually, was it something that you spent a lot of time looking for? How did that kind of come together for you?
So the part of our story of where we were looking for land, we were actually just looking for land to invest in at the time that we purchased our property. It wasn't so much that we thought we would move anytime soon. Maybe once the kids were older and we would retire to a smaller farm and we could just grow our own food, etc. And then things shifted. But when we were looking and searching, we wanted a place that made sense investing in, number one. But my husband specifically, we looked at a lot of properties in Tennessee, and there's lots of trees here. He grew up in Western North Dakota. There's not many trees. And I grew up in Wisconsin, so I was used to it. But for him, he wanted to see that land that could be utilized right away if need be. And so the one that we actually settled on, the thing that got him is when we came down into the property, there's just a big open pasture. And we have trees and stuff on our property and some hills, but there's a big flat open pasture. And that's where he was like, I can see like the vision here. It feels a little bit kind of like home, but not much.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. I think the move, I'm sure, was very stressful for you guys. You mentioned that you were leaving your income behind, his family home. So there's a lot of hard things, but I'm sure there was also a lot of hope for the future as you guys moved. What were some of the things that maybe you were glad to gain when you moved?
Yeah, I think the top of the list of what we were hoping to gain was more family time. Back in North Dakota, it was not out of the ordinary for my husband to work 100 plus hours a week between the ranch work, the cows and the business. And we were always there. The business was on the ranch. And so customers could come whenever and find us. And we are so grateful for our customers. So if any of you ever listen to this, please know that we are so thankful for how you supported our family. But it was hard. It was tough because we were always accessible. And when we moved to Tennessee, both my husband and I were looking to be more intentional with our family time. We have a son who's almost 20, and then we have our youngest right now is 4. And so we missed out on a lot of time with the older kids. We have 2 other teens, and that we didn't want to continue doing with our family. And so being able to be in a place where we could be more intentional with that was really important to us, and to not get so, I guess, pulled into like saying, we're going to work 100 hours and make this work and da, 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 da. That's just not what God is calling us to. It's to be more intentional with our family.
Absolutely. I think that intention is so important, and it's honestly what saves farms if you can figure that out, because being accessible to customers and the long hours, it burns a person out quickly. So what does your farm look like now? What have you guys developed business-wise there?
Yeah, so it's shifting a little bit this year, but in the past 2 years, we have sold pasture-raised chickens, so meat birds off of the farm. We did pasture-raised holiday turkeys. I'm growing to love raising turkeys. It wasn't my favorite thing in the first year. It's something I enjoy now. We have family milk cows, and the first year that we were here, we sold milk off of the farm. This last couple of years, we're not doing that anymore. We're taking that and we're diversifying it back into the farm. And one of the ways was raising bottle cows that we were able to collect, and then taking them and turning them into beef that we're offering for sale off of our place. And then we had brought in a herd of beef cows, a small herd of beef cows, that our goal was to have beef available to sell plenty through 2025. But we had a drought this past summer. And so we had to shift our plans a little bit. And so a lot of those calves actually went to other small farms or homesteads once we weaned them well into weaning, so that they were just ready to go. And they were really docile. So I think it was like the perfect situation to help other small homesteads raise beef cattle for themselves, for their families to put in the freezer, but also with cattle that were tame and not going to potentially hurt them as they were raising them, since most of them were new to it. So we also got to mentor those people through it. It's been a really fun experience.
That's really neat that you were able to shift in that way when the drought came. That's a challenging thing for any farmer when you are up against Mother Nature like that, and figuring out how to shift and stay profitable.
For sure. I think that's one of the best things that we can be, right? Is being able to be shifting and doing whatever you can to make it work, and not getting stuck in a path that's maybe going to lead to ruin.
Yeah.
Willing to shift away from that's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys are doing direct to consumer poultry, and then have been doing some different things with the beef cattle and the dairy. What does that look like for you guys on a day-to-day basis?
So just to clarify, just so everybody knows, this year we've decided not to offer pasture-raised meat birds anymore. We've had a feed situation that has changed. We had a local family farm that we were getting it from, and they decided to close their doors in November. And so we decided to take this time to figure out if we wanted to continue with that next year. But for now, we're not going to do it. But with that, it's not like we're raising crazy amounts of pasture-raised birds, just so everybody knows. We were maybe around this past year, almost 300 is what we did, which is a lot we weren't doing that 3 years ago. But so we did that. We did about 15 to 20 turkeys that we were also doing. And then we had the opportunity. Some of the cows that we bought this past year were not exactly good fits, but we made sound purchasing choices, but they needed to go to the processor after they had their calf weaned. And we were able to sell those beef. And let me tell you, if you don't want to try an older cow's beef, you're missing out. I know that's so random, but you should try older beef a little more often if you haven't.
It's good to know to keep an open mind with some of that stuff. There's a lot of marketing that tells us we can only be interested in certain types of things, but you should try it for yourself. Okay, well, I appreciate your transparency, sharing your numbers. I think that's really cool for people who are interested in doing these kinds of things to just know, here's where they're at, what's feasible for me, and think about how that might fit into their life, which it sounds like you've been doing a lot of with mentoring other homestead families in your area. And that's kind of becoming a bigger part of your business and your life. What has that been like, and what pushed you to go that direction?
For sure. It definitely encompasses most of what I do on social media, is I'm trying to educate and teach about nutrition with cattle, not just beef cattle, but family milk cows. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that I think our background and coming from a different side of agriculture is a good thing to bring to the homesteading community, just to make people think, to even just present it in a way of what we have seen and where we're going. So what happened, why I decided to kind of step into that realm of education on social media, which is not what I was doing. I was teaching, but more about like natural living and simple living and trying to create a little bit cleaner home for your family. I don't mean cleaning. That's not what I mean, but like with what you're using, your products and choosing a little bit better. And the shift happened for me when I was watching someone on social media, and I don't say this to judge them by any means, so I just want to preface this, but they had a milk cow that ended up calving, and there were some really huge things that were missed in that situation, and she ended up losing that calf. And it was something that should have been a foundational animal husbandry for having cattle. And I thought, you know what, if this is what it looks like in this space for people to learn from, then I'm going to just step up and provide another point of view. And hopefully I can help people lay a foundation, and so that not they thrive, but also their animals that they are stewarding. There's a lot of people that are coming from a non-agriculture background into this homesteading type lifestyle. And I think it is just a beautiful spot to be in, to be able to take them under our wings if they want it, and to help them navigate that and hopefully lessen the learning curve for them. And so I answer questions probably. I thought I would count the other day, and I was like, because sometimes you're like, oh, I don't think I'm doing enough or reaching enough people. And I think the other day there was maybe 100+ messages that I went through. And I was like, that's why I need to shut my phone off sometimes, because there was a lot. But I also think of it as I would rather be able to answer people in their questions that they have, even if it's just to bounce something off and know that they can trust me with their situation, and give a little bit of an experienced opinion. And so we just really have set the stage for mentoring people, not only in family milk cows, but beef cattle in the homestead and other things. I mean, we started from raw land. We know infrastructure. We know all that kind of stuff. That's just the lifestyle that we lived before we came here. And so we're just opening ourselves up to provide whatever people need within this space.
Very cool. I think it's sometimes mind-blowing how much you don't know when you get started in homesteading. There's just, it's you're trying to take an entire food system and condense it down into your family, which is
True.
so much to learn. And so there's going to be gaps. So the fact that you can lessen that learning curve for people and make them have a much better experience versus losing the animals that they've worked so hard to get and things like that is invaluable to those folks, I'm sure. Does your business accept online payments, credit cards, or bank transfers? You're going to want to know about a tool called ThriveCart. I've been using this tool on my own website and on clients' websites for years and have been so happy with it. ThriveCart is a software tool you can use to design online checkouts with every option you can dream up. You can sell physical and digital products, connect to loads of other softwares you use for your website, accept payments, email marketing, and more. This is the most powerful tool that I use and the lowest cost one for my business. I recommend it for anyone who accepts online payments, who wants to increase their revenue or average order value on any type of product that you sell. In my show notes, you can find an affiliate link that I have for ThriveCart that gets you a great deal on a one-time payment, no subscription, and also allows me to earn affiliate income from this tool that I really enjoy and recommend. If you have any questions about how ThriveCart could work for your business, feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to chat with you about it. Now, back to the show. What are some of the things that you think have been most pivotal as you have stepped into that space of educating, where you said maybe you didn't see the need for it originally, but now you're like, this is what I need to be doing?
I see that so many people have questions and they're trying to find it for themselves. And they're also trying to do their due diligence and put people in place that have experience. And it's really hard to navigate because if you don't come from the background, if someone's telling you something that is incorrect, if you have no like capability to understand what is correct because it's not where it came from, it's hard to like discern what is right information. And so I find that as a place that people are really seeking. But also the thing I think that strikes me most about this homesteading tsunami, as it's been labeled, is people just want to be able to produce their own food. It's like really, really important to them. And it's not that they don't love the producers across America that are producing food. It's just that they have been so excited to take that into their hands and to do it themselves. And as much as it feels like the gap sometimes between the agriculture community and this homesteading movement, because it is a gap and I can readily see it, I think that there are more things in common that if people would just kind of see that and understand it. And people are just so hungry. They just want knowledge of skills that seem to have been lost.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of like pride and self-confidence that comes from knowing that you can produce your own food and you have the means to support yourself if you needed to. And there are so many things that people say, you know, we've lost those things, and it's like it's the question is also the answer in that situation where we know that we've lost those things and we're trying to get them back without really knowing that's what we're after. Yeah. But I love that there's so many people interested in it. I think a lot of folks, like we talk about big agriculture or big farms, not being a fan of smaller farms or hobby farms or homesteads, because of the competition for land. But at the same time, the only good can come from people being more interested in where their food comes from and wanting to learn more about that. Have you seen any of that in your space where you've kind of been on both sides?
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of conflict in some of this stuff. I'm not the first person to say it, but it is really true. And I really truly wish that everybody would understand what the goal is. And it's to feed America. It's to feed either your families or your communities, and to do it in a way that does it well, stewarding the land and the livestock well. And there may be different ideals of how to get it done. We should just be so excited that people want to do it in all levels. And then, sure, if things need to change, if you want to advocate for something, you'd like to see different, then great. But at least respect the ones who are growing the food, whether it's the small farmer, the homesteader, or someone who has thousands and thousands of acres that they run cattle on. I think one thing is we have this mindset that, because I hear thrown out a lot in my homesteading movement, of industrial farming. And I just want to caution people when you are throwing that out there of what do you think that means? Because we ran cattle and we were one of the smaller ranches, but on 2,000 acres. Well, were we industrial farmers? Were we industrial ranchers? Acreage wise, people would have probably said so, but we would never have called us that. We were ranchers. We raised people's beef in the country. And so I think sometimes we like to put labels on stuff, and maybe labels need to go away. Maybe we shouldn't call ourselves anything. I don't know.
Yeah, it is definitely something that can be misconstrued, and means different things to different people.
It does.
Well, you have a wealth of experience on kind of both sides of the spectrum here. What are some of the biggest things that you have learned in your journey so far? You can interpret that however you want.
Yeah. So gardening has been one of the hardest things for me. I mean, it's been good. Like Tennessee, you can grow vegetables. You can also grow weeds. So they both grow really easily. But that's not something that I was used to doing. And so that's been a learning curve for me, but I've really enjoyed it for the most part of just understanding that. And then it's also, I think, what comes back to the whole thing for people growing their food, raising their food, across the board is there is that sense of pride in it. Like I look at my shelves that are filled with things that I grew in that garden for my family that we eat from. And I don't do it out of prepping out of fear for anything. I do it because that's how I want my family to eat. I can grow this food for them and it actually saves us money. I'm not going to the grocery store. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's been a very hard lesson. And it's one place that I have myself have mentors because I need them. I need people to tell me what to do.
That's cool. I think that's also one of the things with homesteading that you can underestimate when you get started in it is how vastly different the skills can be. We're talking in family milk cows to raising proteins to gardening. It's like that's not just one skill set. And then preserving what you harvest. And it's like it's a whole set of skills that we aren't familiar with anymore. Where did you focus on kind of expanding your skills from what you knew from growing up?
Yeah, so gardening. Even growing up, my brother was the one who eventually grew a garden. He's a few years older than me on the farm that we grew up on, but I never really messed with the garden at all. And so that is something that I had no experience in. But the rest of it we did. We raised our own chickens. We raised our own hogs. We would bring home dairy steers. So we had bottle calves. We raised our own steers for meat. We had horses. We had all of those kind of things. And it did set us up for where we are at and what we're doing now, even beyond the beef cows and the family milk cows. Like I have that background and I'm so grateful for my parents because they gave us that legacy. I do wish they would have grown a garden a little sooner and that I would have got some experience from that, but it's okay.
Yeah. Do you have any resources that you have used to expand your knowledge that you could refer to other folks that are getting started?
For sure. So if you're in Tennessee, I'm just going to throw this out there. This is very specific to Tennessee. There is a book called Grow Great Vegetables in Tennessee. If you live here, get the book. It gives you varieties that do well here. I thought that was so helpful. The second thing that I did is I was searching. I'm like, I don't know when to start seeds. I don't know when to plant them. This is just too much. And I couldn't wrap my brain around it. And I found an app that's free and it's called Seed Time. And I can send a link if anybody wants to check it out, or you can just search for it. And what you do is you figure out, okay, I want to grow tomatoes, green beans, and turnips. And you input it into their system that they have, their app. And it tells you when to start the seedlings if you're starting them from there, when to direct sow them, when to, like the window you're going to harvest them. It can tell you to schedule like more rounds of these if you're doing extra crops. I mean, it's fantastic. And it was what I needed to help me get through, minus having, or also alongside of having mentors that were like, I can help you. You have a question? Let me tell you.
That's really cool. I'll have to check out that app because I've been planning my garden for this year and planning like probably an overly obnoxious one. And I've been trying to like map out where everything's going to be planted so it can be, productive to the one next to it and disease resistant, all the things. And it's like it becomes this never-ending math problem, but
it truly does.
I'll have to check out that app. Speaking of, how has bringing your family and your kids along for the ride here been a part of your journey?
Yeah, I think if I could just say the hardest thing for at least one of my teenage daughter, she has not struggled, but it's been hard for her because we went from being in the school system to homeschooling. Back in North Dakota, minus the bigger high school public school system, our kids mostly went to a one-room schoolhouse that had like 13 kids in it, and it was a beautiful model. And so we were so grateful that we had that, but we don't have that here. But transitioning from public school to homeschooling, along with all of the other chaos that we were going through of moving our family here, because when we moved here, we moved to a framed house that was closed in, weatherproofed in, but we didn't have water. We lived in a camper for a few months while we finished the inside, dug a well, which don't do that. Don't move to a property and build a house and not have a well or water source. That's really stupid. But with the kids, it was hard because like we were so focused on just getting things set up for them and more peaceful and not chaotic. And we didn't do a lot of things off of the place. And so it was like, okay, our kids need to see more people. They need to meet the community, and we need to pay attention to that. They need people around them. We can't just stay on the farm the whole time, which is what we did back in North Dakota. So it was kind of eye-opening that we were trying to do the same thing again that we were doing back in North Dakota. But they've loved it. My son never really hunted before we moved here, and he got his first deer down here in Tennessee by himself. Like, he went and hunted by himself. He fishes as much as he wants. There's a river that's really close he can walk to. There's a neighbor with some ponds that are stocked with fish. I think he's enjoying it because he has the ability to just go do the things that I was able to do growing up. And not that we couldn't necessarily do those things in North Dakota, but it is different down here.
Sure. That's really cool. I think that's one piece of the story we skipped over there, is the fact that you guys moved to raw land. What were some of your biggest learning points from that experience?
Again, don't build a house without a well being dug. We actually had to swim in the river until October to bathe. I shouldn't say swim. We bathed in the river because we didn't have water. And once it got too cold, a ranch up the road allowed us to come to their nicer barn that had a bathroom in it. We could shower up there. It's something that we will always remember as fondly in our story, but it was really hard. It was really tough. I mean, you have all the emotions of everything that we dealt with leaving North Dakota, and then you come here and you have a house that has just framed walls. And so even for our kids, it was a transition into living in a camper for a few months while we tried to get the house at least livable. And I would say we did a pretty good job. We did the drywall. We did most of the finished work except for the electrical and plumbing. We hired that part out and the insulation. But then we did the rest of it. And we were living in the camper in the beginning of October, and we were in the house right after Christmas. Oh, and not that it was finished. I mean, I was washing my dishes in a tub in the bathroom tub itself, but like we were able to live in the house and have a little more space. And so that was really nice. So I feel like we've done pretty good in the time frame that we've been here and all that we've accomplished. I feel really proud of us for getting through that very hard, trying season.
Yeah, that sounds very uphill, but yeah, I would say you've not been there very long and have come a very long ways with the things that you show on social media and that we've talked about today. That's incredible that you guys have been able to accomplish that. Well, I love to always ask people what it is that has been something that's kept them going, that they would like to share with our listeners, something positive, something that brings light to a space that can sometimes be a little pessimistic or discouraging.
Yeah, so I touched on it a little bit of how thankful I am for the way that I grew up and what my parents gave to us, myself and my siblings included. They taught us a lot of skills that we are using now, and it's been very clear to me that those are skills that I want my kids at least to have. If they never need to use them, at least they have them. But I think that that's what's been most important to me, is that I get to pass on a legacy of skills, just like my parents did for me, and just like their parents and their family that taught them. And I get to take it on to the next generation. And I hope at the very least they'll teach their next generation that it doesn't matter to me if they want to farm. It doesn't matter if they want to live the way that I live, but at least I've set them up so that they have the skills if they ever need to. And that's really important. I mean, we live in a time, it seems like everything's crazy and haywire, weather's going crazy. And I'm not a pessimist and I will never say that, but I feel like what we are doing has purpose. And I'm so grateful that we get to provide that to our kids.
Absolutely. That resonates a lot with me and the reasons that I started this podcast. I think passing that legacy and those skills onto our kids is something we often forget about because it seems like it's, it just gets wrapped up in everything else. But realizing that they are going to have that for the rest of their life to fall back on or to grow on is really powerful. Is there anything in particular about that you're just like really glad that you've passed on to them or that you're working on passing on to them? Like maybe your favorite thing?
I don't know if it's my favorite, but anytime that we are processing an animal, I think as much as it's not always that fun, I think that that is a thing that strikes me the most is that my kids will never go hungry because they can raise them or grow food if they need to, or they can hunt or fish for it. Those are skills that no matter what is happening, they can take with them and they can feed themselves. And I'm a big, firm believer in having food sovereignty, creating a system within what you have or within your local community so that you can take all of that by your own hands and that you can succeed with it no matter what is going on around you. And I think that that's probably my favorite thing that we are doing with our kids. My daughter, I can't say that she enjoys the processing part, but at least she knows how.
Yeah. Understanding is a big piece of it too. Even if they don't choose to eat that way or live that way in the future, at least they know, the steps that it went through to get to their plate, which is just as important sometimes in our society today. You mentioned food sovereignty. Talk a little bit more about what that means to you specifically, because you mentioned just a couple key things there about, taking hold of it in your hands or within your community and being able to utilize that. What else is important about that to you?
I think setting up the systems in place for you to be able to have complete control over your food system. And that might look like sourcing it throughout your community, but putting those people in place. If I didn't want to raise hogs this year, which I'm going to raise some pigs, if I didn't want to do that, I want to know who in my community can I trade or barter for or pay for raising that. And the reason I think that it is so important is not because I think that this country is going to like fall apart tomorrow, because I pray that it will never do that. But I think we can all look at history of other countries and where we've come even as a country and say that can't be out of the realm of something that could happen. And so our goal here is to continue to work towards, I hate the word self-sufficiency because it is community sufficiency, but I want to look towards how can I take my food system and bring it completely onto my farm and make it continue to work. Well, I have beef cows. I have a neighbor just up the road. I can get a bull always that can get them bred. So there I have a source of beef always. This year we're trying out some chickens that maybe aren't going to be as big as like a Cornish cross, but they're still going to provide chicken. Well, they lay eggs too, so I can take those eggs and next year we can hatch some so we won't have to purchase that off of here. I think the trickiest part is the feeding of feed and stuff like that and finding that kind of space that it works for you and for that. I'm so grateful for our community and I'm so grateful for our country. And I never want anybody to think that I am not. But I also know that my family's safety, my family's health is in my hands. And that's my priority. And it's nobody else's job to take care of them. And so I'm going to do everything possible to do that. And I believe that that is what being sovereign means. It's meaning you're taking your health, your food in your own hands, and you're taking control of it.
Yeah, absolutely. The way you said that just made me think of it's just another form of insurance. We buy insurance for so many things we own, but this is a way to give yourself insurance through the things that you do every day, against whatever tragedy may come. We don't know. That's why we have insurance. Well, I love that piece there. And I think you mentioned the feeding the feed or growing the feed or however you source the feed being a challenge. And I have focused on that issue and gotten hung up on it so many times because when you look at homesteading, it's like this ever expanding web of like, I can take this in and I can take this in and no, I'm not going to buy that anymore. But at some point it becomes unmanageable. And tracing it all the way back to growing the feed that you feed all of your animals is like that extra step, I think, that is really challenging, but also like something that's fun to try to figure out how to.
It is really fun. I've gotten really interested in looking at books from like the 1800s. That's about the genre that I'm in right now, or the range, of history, and just looking at what they fed their animals on the farms back then, because it's not always what we're feeding today. And I mean, even I was reading specifically on dairy cows. This guy was talking about how he fed certain types of cabbage, like he grew thousands of cabbages, and there were a variety that didn't make the milk taste bad, which is important.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And that was one of the things that they used for forage or for a food supplementation for their cows through the seasons where the grass wasn't growing as well. And so I just love that. And there's also people out there. I mean, if anybody's interested in trying to do more along the lines of keeping your farm running off of what you can grow, the Independent Farmstead is a great book to have to at least get a starting off point. I don't know if anybody will, I mean, for the majority, if people will get to the point where they can do everything and grow all of their food, when you balance that with the time you actually have. And so I think it's a unique topic that I think more of us wish that we could do completely, but I don't know if it's achievable.
Yeah. The value trade-off is probably not worth it, which is why we have communities to rely on so that we can diversify that way. Well, Janelle, I am so appreciative of all of the insight and experience that you've shared with folks today about your journey and what you guys are doing. Where can people learn more about you and what you have coming up?
Yeah, so they can find us on the havenfarmstead.com. That's our website. There's a bunch of different stuff. I'll be adding like any of the places that I'm speaking at this year. There's quite a few conferences that I'll be at this year talking about family milk cows or beef cows or who knows, all the topics. And then you can also find me on social media over on Instagram. It's just Janelle Anderson. I would love to answer any questions that people have about any of this. I mean, and if I don't know it, I'll pass you off to someone who does or say that you can get it. But I just want to encourage everybody to kind of dig a little deeper and find places where you can increase your skill level all over the place. It's like the hunger that we have to learn, no matter if it is about farming or agriculture. Take that and at least find skills that you can like bolster yourself with, because I think everybody should want to do that.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, thank you so much. Everybody be sure to check out Janelle online and the things that she's got going on. Lots of great resources. And thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
If you've enjoyed spending time with us today, please take a moment to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or join the conversation on social media. Do you have a topic you would like to discuss or know someone with a story to share? Apply to be a guest on the podcast at farmingonpurpose.com. You can follow the host of Farming on Purpose, Lexi, on your favorite social media platforms for more content by searching for Farming on Purpose. And remember, if you look around your table and aren't inspired by the people there, it's time to find a new seat.